Yeah, sure. Perfect. I'd like to call this meeting and we will walk, police committee of the order. Sarah, I think of the roll call.
Please say your and I call your names on the piece of paper. Pat what?
Here.
Pat Faulkner.
Here.
Laura Peck. Eric Clark.
Here.
Mike Whitmore.
Here.
That's one.
Is Laura planning for a
I
time?
know.
She is planning for things. She sent me an email earlier, so maybe, sorry, I should have waited and made sure that we, had everybody, so she's probably gonna be coming shortly.
Okay. Why don't we, the people had a chance to use the agenda, do we have any changes to it? Do we have any approval of the agenda? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. The next item on the agenda is to discuss and take action on the minutes from our meeting in April 8th, that is correct, 2024, the last time this committee met. The motion to approve, I vote to approve the minutes from April 2024 meeting. Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes? Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is citizen comment for any subject not on the agenda. So we are gonna get to items 5, 6, and 7, and we will take public comment from anyone who wants to discuss. People online too, who, any residents online.
And we do have some people coming, trickling in right now.
Perfect. So we will take citizen comment of each of these items as they come up. We will probably will plan to do people in the room first, and then we'll go to anyone online. If you're online and want to make citizen comment on any of these agenda items, you can just raise your hand or let us know in the comment field or do something so that we know that you're doing something other than just listening. So,
Mr. Chair, could I offer some citizen comment?
yes,
On the subject? Not on the agenda, I just wanted to recognize Jim Yeager. I see that our last meeting was last spring in 2024. That was of this committee, and Jim served the village in many ways as a trustee and committee member, service commissioner. As most of you know, he passed away in a few months. So I just wanted to acknowledge his service on this committee.
excellent. Items to go. Any other comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, if not, we will go to item number 5, discuss the general department operations, including proactive control strategies. Tanner, I don't know if you want to lead us through this item and talk about what materials are on there and provide some background to the committee. I know this is an item that we discussed before at the police committee as well as at the village board level. And I appreciated the fact that you put together some updated materials here so that everyone can kind of be aware of the philosophy of the police department. And then we'll get into the overall proceedings. But if we could talk first just about general strategies and your agenda item 5, that would be great.
Thank you. So I wanted to have something, an orienting conversation a little bit for a couple of different reasons. One, we have a couple of new members on the police committee. Nice to see you. Good to see you, Laura. Thank you guys for your service. I appreciate it. And during summer months, summer months are always more active for our police department, and that's consistent every year, and there's a number of different reasons why. But we've also been taking a number of steps to improve our operations and our proactivity over the past couple of years specifically, and which can generate attention from residents. And as members of the police committee, I think it's important that you all are best understanding of why we approach operations the way you do, because you're the most likely to receive questions from your fellow residents and your neighbors. And I want to make sure that at least I do my best to equip you to have those conversations. In addition to that, when we issue overnight parking tickets, or we have residents who are pulled over, and receive either a warning or a citation, it isn't infrequent that it comes to my email or my phone, and, it generates some concern. I do my best to educate residents why we do what we do, and parking tickets are one that really came out recently, and I like to let people know that, there's very easy accommodations to be made, and we also online by just requesting the overnight parking request form, as well as, if you receive a parking citation and you have a valid reason, we also have a form online where you can request an exemption from that citation. So, trying to be as understanding and as supportive of the community, but also helping people understand why we do certain things that we do here to keep the community as safe, and harmonious as possible. So this is an attempt to provide some clarity on, why our officers are proactive and more visible, especially during the summer months. In the, documentation, there was a single page handout that I provided for this agenda topic. I go through, how we achieve prevention, essentially, how we achieve public safety initiatives, public safety, and crime prevention within the village. And it is through combining our proactive traffic enforcement, parking enforcement, priorities, conducting property and vacation checks for our residents, and also, being engaged and active at public events. Historically, and I started working for the Maplewood Police Department in about 2012 as a part-time officer and as a detective. And during that time, police officers weren't really visible or present at many community events, and that was intentional. We've deliberately taken an approach to be much more engaging at public events over the past couple of years, because I think that a good relationship with our community is only going to benefit us. And it takes away the barrier that a uniform can create pretty frequently in our profession that we're pretty commonly encounter. It also helps us establish what you'll find in those of you who've been on the community for a while and who've also read the materials, an element of deterrence. We try to maintain deterrence within our community, and that's criminal deterrence. People from acting either recklessly or dangerously or committing crime within our community. We'd like to deter that from happening. So that means that our residents are safe, they don't become victims of crime, and as a pedestrian-friendly lakeside community, that's an important thing, a foundationally important thing for the rest of our village operations and the quality of life. The goal for deterrence is to, our officers are proactive and they can quickly ID and interdict when we do encounter people who are engaged in or about to engage in criminal activity. They can safely control the situation and take individuals who have committed crimes into custody quickly and pursue proportionate charges with the district attorney's office. So making sure we do good follow through and hold people accountable, because the vast majority of crime is conducted by a very small population of society in general. And so holding them accountable will prevent future crime. And so with all of that said, I just wanted to orient everyone to kind of those tools that we have in our toolbox, the traffic enforcement, parking enforcement, vacation checks, and public event presence, so you kind of understand when we see our officers out more active, especially this time of year. And I wanted to also open it up at this point for any questions. As you're aware, we have on our website, we have not only public safety data, but we have our operational overview, which is a long document, I understand that. And we also have our pursuit overview and other related supporting items, such as notable calls. Every month we push out a brief synopsis of all the notable calls that our officers are involved in. And so the only other document I would say is in your packets as well, there is a copy of the statistics or public safety data from 2018 until 2024. And I wanted to make that available for you today, so it's on the table for the broader discussion as well.
I think you're opening for questions, is that consistent?
So Mike is the chair.
I was gonna do, many members first, and then we'll break those and comments, that's okay.
It's perfect.
I just don't have to understand. And it's always fine if we do citizen comment first, people have questions at the meeting. Committee discussion. Questions, and we want to talk about the thing.
Tanner, thanks for all those materials. I spent a few hours reading all this stuff because I'm brand new to this. And I have a bunch of questions, but it's mostly because I don't know, how these things are working. And I will say that, when we first moved to the village, it was 25 years ago. And I thought the police presence was very community oriented. I remember with our kids, there were some, policemen or whatever, they had horses, and of course, my little girl was absolutely, mesmerized by that. And I remember the, police just being more around at, park or wherever, I don't know. But I applaud you for, getting our officers or refocusing the officers maybe back into the community. We talked about this at the board meeting last time, that the fire, personnel was there at the concert the other night, and it was great. And I would encourage all of, both fire and the police to introduce themselves to village residents. I think that is the most, the easiest way to make your presence known and to get to know, the residents and them. I have no idea, and I should have, what the names are of all of it, like you had an org chart, but there are no names, so I don't even know the names of the officers. And I would like to, and I would think that, most of the residents would at least, be able to recommend. Get to know some. And I think that will only help. Their sourcing, residents. I looked at the statistics and, as expected, traffic checks and vacation check items were the top items, which is actually, right? In a village about a size. I didn't know what some of the, things meant. And I don't know if this is the appropriate, time to ask, but, I think that's stratified
Like policing.
policing, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a relatively new tactic, well, at least in that vernacular, right? Essentially what it means is the officers are gonna pull a case number, or let's say they're gonna go sit on 615 North Sherman and monitor traffic for a period of time.
Where's that? What is that?
Sorry, over at Vic Pierce, or
Okay.
anywhere in the village, if the officers are gonna go and be a presence patrol, make their presence known and monitor traffic for a period of time. They'll pull a case number for that period of time that they're gonna do that. And so what that does is it helps us quantify what their actions actually are and location on where that occurred
Okay,
from the
that's what's stratified.
stratified police.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So the, sorry, can I? Let's see, some of the other questions I had was, about block and how it's used on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
Can you walk me through that?
Sure.
I understand that you're not, it's just vehicle, info and license plate, not people, but, how's that used?
So Flock interacts with a state and federal databases and will notify, it's a software that will notify our officers when there's a hit. And hits occur, so it's an ALPR, automated license plate reader, that reads the license plate of every vehicle that go by, and it runs that license plate through a database. If that license plate is associated with a stolen vehicle, a wanted person, someone with a protection order, a more severe kind of public safety issues or concerns, that can then generate an immediate notification, so maybe a 30-second delay notification to the software that our officers can run both in the vehicle and also on their phone. And so, it can be very helpful. It does not provide data on like registration violations, license violations, low-level offenses of that nature. It only kind of, it allows immediate notification for more severe things that have been put into the Natural Crime Intelligence Center.
Stolen,
Or
or,
stolen.
yeah, like, the person that owns the car is, there's a, nail by me.
Bail wouldn't hit on it. So
Okay.
it's a little bit complicated on how that data entry occurs.
Okay.
And you don't always, if someone has a warrant, oftentimes it won't generate a hit just because of the rules and regulations and the way information intersects at the state level. But it's also used, we can also generate our own hit lists too with the officers we can create. So if we have a vehicle that fled from us in a previous period of time, or there was a crime that occurred that we have a vehicle that is associated with that, we can generate a hit so that if it comes back to the village, we know that it came to the village. Those hit lists are pretty small in nature, and vehicles come pop on or pop off as day-to-day operations flow. But Flock also allows for a 30-day archive. So let's say a crime occurred at a village resident's home, and we needed to canvass, we knew the route of the vehicle that went. We could then look at a time period and look and see if we could find the vehicles that went by a Flock camera that met the description of the vehicle. So it's an investigative resource as well. And there, we have 7 of them in the village. Most of them are located on our peripheries. There's one that's located at Beach Park.
Does it give you a hit if a car does not have a license plate?
No.
Unfortunately. They can tell you if a car didn't have a license.
The challenge is, again, the Flock camera systems aren't intended to aid in enforcement of low-level traffic violations or equipment violations or registration violations. The main intent is for more serious crime, but the value to our community, I think, is one, it acts as a deterrent. 2, it is a data set that's lasts for 30 days. You can go 30 days back. And if there's a crime that we need to investigate or suspicious activity or something, we at least have a lead or something that we can go back to. And the cameras are positioned in such, when we installed them, we did so such that anybody who comes into our community, their vehicle is gonna go by a Flock camera. So we should, in theory, if you come into our community, have a picture of the car.
Can you tell me where those are? So,
Sure, we have one down on Sherman Avenue on the south side of Fuller's Woods. We have one at the intersection of Harbor and Sherman, that more complex intersection.
yeah,
We have one over on Commercial Avenue, on the east side of North Sherman, basically by the railroad tracks. We have one right over here, on North Sherman Avenue outside of the village center. We have one at Beach Park, and we have one at the Marine.
and are they visible? Oh, yeah.
They are, and I encourage you.
The lower panel is how I.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah, it's that runs.
yeah.
All right.
and on that note, Flock is always, we're coming up on the expiration of that contract next year. I think it's a worthy investment for the community, especially given, the staffing levels that we have. I think we really need to make sure we leverage technology to support our officers to be able to do the best jobs that they can. We're looking at what the cost benefit analysis might be for adding actual live feed cameras on those poles as well. But again, whenever you talk about cameras in public spaces, it generates reasonable and important discussions to be had, because there's trade-offs associated with that.
Do surrounding communities use these?
So a lot of communities use them nationwide. The city of Madison does not use ALPR whatsoever.
Anything else?
Oh, absolutely. Dane County uses, I think, Nona, Fitchburg, I'd say the majority of other communities around that use them at this point.
Once you notice these solar panels, I notice them now, but sitting at a traffic light.
I haven't had
I'll
reason
see
to
one.
notice them, now I will. Okay,
And another part about
like
it is
Shorewood.
there's also a sharing component with it. So let's say we had an investigation into a vehicle we had a license plate for. And Dane County shared their cameras with us. If that vehicle drives by a Dane County camera, we can get a notification on where that vehicle is. So they can help them investigate.
And vice versa,
And like,
right? Well,
collaboration.
I would think that most of the hits, that's a hit list, right? Most of the hits are not related to village fund
No.
per se. They're much more likely to be related to the action crime. So have you forwarded, are there any actions? What does Maple Bluff do with that, or is it all through the system?
It's all through the system. We engage in, basically access sharing for if someone wants to search.
Mhm.
Let's say the, Dane County Narcotics Task Force had an open investigation they were conducting, and they wanted to find out where certain vehicles that they were investigating that found. They could run that and then use that as part of the investigation.
Okay. So you get a hit. And
They could
may
search it.
not be looking for that, or it may.
They
go to
could,
their
there's a search
main
feature
authority.
too, it's not just a hit, so like if
Yeah.
they're a license, but you can search for that. Like,
What you're saying though is that it's more likely that they'll search for something and find that they're not monitoring. That hits go through Maple Bluff on a daily basis.
And part of that search function is a requirement to put in a case number, justification for why you're doing it, so there's an audit trail behind the types of searches that any agency does.
Wait,
So if I wanna run a search for a vehicle, a plate, a
Oh.
license plate, I have to provide a case number and a justification for what I'm doing. Right?
that's the search.
It's one of the control features to prevent, concerns about, improper utilization.
Your question, the discussion points for camera, item number 5. Yeah.
I, can I also ask, I didn't know about the WSLO
Mhm.
program. Can you take 2 minutes to tell me what that's all about?
I think it was last year, we, worked to establish a 501c3, called the We Support Local Officers Foundation. The purpose of that foundation was to provide support to the Maple Bluff police officers and assist them with either relief, wellness, equipment support, other things. It was primarily focused on the officers and supporting them. Although if the officers are asking for, hey, we'd really like our, what was one of the examples that they did? Oh, they wanted new body camera clips, right? So we have body cameras and they wanted a different clip for it. We don't necessarily have that in the budget to provide those. They write a grant proposal, they forward a grant proposal to me, it gets approved, I submit it to the foundation, and the foundation makes a determination on whether or not it's something that they want to support. There are 2 types of grants. There are individual grants and there are department grants. An individual grant would be, let's say, an officer needed some familiar support. They're having a difficult time and we want to provide them and their family with some relief. That'd be an individual grant, and the foundation has the individual autonomy to approve those. Anything that's a department grant, so like these clips that apply more broadly to the department, once the foundation approves it, it then goes to the village board for approval. To ensure there's another check and balance, to ensure that the foundation isn't, funding equipment that maybe the community would not completely agree.
And who's on the foundation?
Scott Faulkner is the president of the foundation.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Cullen is on the foundation. Casey King is on the foundation.
Mhm.
Paul Graining, Jeff Beckman, And those are all village residents. And then we have two former police officers who are on the foundation as well. Kyle Bennett, who's currently a city of Madison, sergeant, and Keith Wilkie, who's a retired Madison fire officer and, part-time police officer with the Newport Police Department.
There's a similar mechanism that there's always existed for the fire department, that has been in place on.
The association has been around, I don't even know.
Which I was unaware of when even village residents who had made donations to the fire department that could not for the police department, we didn't have a similar.
Wow, okay. No, I think I knew.
And we, at the time it was created and doing so on, we thought long and hard about how to move it and we checked it, so we couldn't. Yeah, so we don't want.
Give another.
Correct. Yeah.
The board approval on certain things really works well too. I think it's a great check and balance. We like it.
Yeah, the only question I had that somebody asked me the other day, do we have it posted anywhere about no overnight parking? Do we have any signs that say no overnight parking in the village, or is it just the ordinance and that's it?
I do not believe there are any signs that say no overnight parking in the village.
Did we give a warning the first time with the car?
So as a policy matter, it's not dictated that the first time has to be a warning. However, I would say that it is pretty common for our officers to issue warning more frequently than second reading.
And the issue was brought to my attention that sometimes on Lakewood Boulevard, people will park there who live across the street and don't understand at first that it's a low parking, because on the city of Madison side, they actually can park overnight, but if they park on Lakewood Boulevard, they can't. And I didn't know the answer to how do we let people know if it's a new resident, moved in somewhere nearby there that, you can on one side, but not on.
So these mechanisms were in place before I got here, but I think that there's a lot of wisdom in why they were put in place the way they are. First off, our parking citation is $10, right? So, it's pretty nominal fee in comparison, especially if you look at other communities around. We made it so that people can request overnight parking by just going on the website. And then also, if someone does get a citation and they want to request an exemption, they can do that by going online as well and just filling out about 6 different fields in an online system. I haven't seen anyone decline when they requested an exemption and get declined for it. Okay.
And so an exemption.
It's the pressure release valve.
You have guests that are gonna live not enough room in their driveway or something.
It's almost always a very reasonable reason why someone would park on the street. It's the slow way that we educate the public about why we have no on-street parking.
And that's after, if you make a request and notify the village that you're gonna be parking overnight from. Then you have that information and citation issue. What you're talking about is after the fact, for somebody be able to do that.
And there are other circumstances where someone will fill out an online overnight parking request the day of, and it doesn't make it through our process to get on our spreadsheet, so the officers know, and they get a citation. I mean, that can happen, just because of the process and the time that it takes to make it through that process, and the information to get onto our data spreadsheet that the officers have.
And curiously, how community to the north of us, there are a lot of violations of the parking, which I find interesting.
So they're paying a lot of tickets for somebody from the.
I don't know. I don't know what that thing is. I never look at it from the window. But the residents there ought to know about it.
It's in the newsletter too.
I try to consistently message some of the key information that we want residents to be aware of. One of them being, we don't have a dispatch center and there isn't always someone in the office. If you need an officer, please call daytime non-emergency. It's easy to put the sort of an officer. Parking, actually put together kind of public pamphlets for this summer that we've been handing out. If you haven't got one, I guess we're not gonna do much job in the food, it's gonna be handed out, but they can cover a lot of these topics as well.
Say something to him. Figure that out. I wasn't gonna call
Trying
him
to
out.
keep-
Now it's a matter of record.
Any other committee comment? Brian? All right, I wanted to, just, Ryan, Brennan, Unity Blue Circle. And many of you I don't know on this committee, and I just want to give some context that I'm a concerned and frustrated citizen. 20 months ago, Brendan Gully died in a pursuit, 2 doors down from my house. 19 months ago, I copied Tanner and Mike on an email to create awareness that our pursuit rate is at that time was 459 times out of offices. I'm here because I agree with Professor John Gross, the clinical associate professor of law at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who said that our pursuit rate is an aberration, and it's clearly a result of policy and culture that is driving that behavior. And Hammer is a leader of that, and this committee is a leader of that. So it's not like this is the first time I'm talking about things, so my tone is one of frustration. But the proactive control strategies, I think every small community that lives next to a major thoroughfare, interstate, highway to Roseville, or a thoroughfare in the city has a question, and that's how much of their police resources they allocate to that thoroughfare, and how much do they allocate to their city. And I think I looked at the map of Shorewood, and they're very similar to us. They go right up to University. So they have University Avenue, we got Sherman. And I don't know what their results are, but they certainly didn't make the article that they wrote on us in Monona recently about the results that are aberration and concern. So my concern has been that we allocate disproportionate amount of police resources on Sherman. And then that's part of what sets us up with this disproportionate. We're currently talking about. Tanner, I would compliment you on what you said about, I don't know the lexicon of policing and the law. We talked about how now we are creating data breadcrumbs, and when someone sits, I don't want to call it, we just sit and wait for traffic on like Sherman, you get exactly to create a case. So we should be able to now see what we call that, a traffic. What do you call that when you're sitting waiting for?
So what was asked earlier was, what is stratified policing? And that's a case number that officers can pull, which is we had 114, 256 case numbers pulled for stratified policing in 2024.
So this board should now be able to tell in reporting what percent of our policing is done on Sherman versus, at the intersection of Fisk and Kensington on Thursday night, when people are in the country club or something like that. We can start to quantify just how much of our resources we spend on the thoroughfare that is our border versus our own. So I hope we're not going to all of this area. So I compliment you on that. I would ask, do you know what percent we are spending on Sherman versus on the rest of maybe I would call it the contiguous or the Maple Bluff. So no.
So I don't have statistics for locational data regarding all incidents the Maple Bluff Police Department is engaged in. I will say that since the vast majority, so the village board heard a presentation from Porchlight. I don't know how many months ago, Porchlight, and I'll butcher exactly what it is they do from a technical perspective. They take data from cell phones to make traffic analysis and traffic pattern analysis. And the vast majority of traffic absolutely that comes through the village of Maple Bluff comes through 1 North Sherman Avenue. And likewise, I would say the vast majority of our traffic contacts also occur, from observations on North Sherman Avenue as well, which we own, from the railroad tracks down to Commercial Avenue on both sides of Village of Maple Bluff, and then down to the intersection of Sherman, North Sherman, and Fordham on the west side is all Village of Maple Bluff as well. So yeah, I would say that the majority of traffic contacts and engagements that we have are from that main thoroughfare that comes through our community.
I would like to respond. It's intuitively obvious that the majority of the traffic flows through it. Any small town next to an interstate, the majority of traffic is on that interstate. The question is, what is our strategy for how much we enforce the interstate versus our town? And I think that probably is as big or bigger than our pursuit policy in our average results for pursuit rates that are 500 times Madison, 140 times Golden, Illinois, which I'll speak to, and we're off the charts with that. So I'm glad that you're having your officers create a case. I would love to see you reporting to this board routinely. If you could pull out filter those cases for only where they're sitting and doing traffic enforcement, and report what percent of the time do they do traffic enforcement on Sherman versus the rest of Maple Bluff. So we can see, is it 99%? And is that what you want as a board?
And I will just respond and say, I think there is a notable difference. So I do encourage our officers to conduct traffic enforcement on Sherman Avenue. Absolutely, I do. I think that the vast majority of challenges that come to our community originate from passive traffic. In fact, last year, out of the 112 arrests that our officers made, none of them were village residents. All of the vehicle pursuits that we engaged in, none of them were for people who were either in our community or coming to our community to visit the passive traffic. So one of the primary safety concerns that we have in this community is from the nature of that passive traffic, which isn't an interstate. It is through a residential neighborhood. North Sherman Avenue on the west side of the street and on the east side of the street for a good portion are residential residences where community members live. Where the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, it is a little bit faster than it is, 30 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour faster than it is by anyone else's house in the building as well.
No, so I think Tanner and I just agree to disagree on this topic. The point I'm making is, think Shorewood. Are they having 95% of their traffic stops on University Avenue? Or are they spending their time within the village of Shorewood? And what do we want? What do you want to do? Because Tanner works at our will, and this board is an advisory board that advises back to our board of trustees. You decide.
Ryan, can I ask you a question? Because to make sure I understand, is it that you think there needs to be more sort of within the village other than Sherman Avenue?
Less insurance.
You just think less than Sherman, but are you seeing an insufficient amount of police presence within
Not at
the
all.
interior?
I feel
Okay,
so safe in Maple Bluff.
okay.
And then I would like to, Tanner, you talk about proactive traffic makes us safer. And you talk about how we arrest all these non-Maple Bluff people passing through. But how, what is the mechanism for how am I safe on Woodland Circle? I'll just for hyperbole, I'll just say when you're arresting people on the interstate. I don't necessarily believe that. I think there's also a negative to over policing this poor, more racially diverse community that happens to drive through Sherman. So we're 91% white. We're the third highest property value municipality in Wisconsin on Short Hills and then Conlock Lake. We're less than 1% black. We keep ethnic racial data on our traffic stops.
No,
But why not?
it's just not part of the data set that is.
So it's just our IT system doesn't have fuel for that.
IT system. So when an officer conducts a traffic stop, right, an officer conducts a traffic stop, depending on the outcomes of that stop is going to depend on the data that's collected. So if you make a stop and it's a warning, you know, that will never generate into an actual report, where you're gonna put the individual details, such as name, date of birth, racial identity, sexual identity, gender identity, all of those variables, they don't make their way into a database. Now, if it's a case, if it gets turned into a case, that gets generated into a report. And that gets generated, put into a records management software. However, that records management software isn't filtering for reports that say X amount, by race or sex identity.
So does it have a field that we could run to?
I would have to look into it because we've never focused on it.
So Madison keeps that, Madison publicly reports it, you don't have to do an information request. They're like, they're active now. Yep, yep. So, the SNP test, I'm gonna play it, alter point of view, is that this rich, lily white, small community uses their wealth to fund a police force that is aggressively policing the poorer and more racially diverse neighborhood to keep us safer. And there's a lot of negative to that. It's not just upside, that's not a good look. So that's how I view it. I'm sure other people do it that way as well.
I'll say this is that, people are, we don't enforce people's characteristics, right? Like somebody who speeds, they get pulled over because they were speeding. They don't get pulled over for any other reason. If someone, gets arrested, it's because of the actions that they took, no other variable. And so, I understand that is a common perspective and a common narrative. I can guarantee you it's not how our officers operate.
I don't necessarily believe it from anecdotally what I've seen. I've seen the expensive Mercedes roll through a stop sign and a police officer there, nothing happened. When the jalopy go through, or a car full of African Americans and they followed. So my anecdotal evidence was not fine with that. A great way to disprove that would be to track racial data on all traffic stops and be transparent.
I'm just curious about how the city of Madison accumulates that data, and just looking at my driver's license, it doesn't say anything on there about race, and tax, and all those things are included, so the officer asks, or the officer, I guess, just checks the box, and makes an assumption, I guess, based on race and checks the box.
I have a good question. So you're safe in Mason Bluff, you feel comfortable within the village. What is your problem with pulling over criminals on Sherman Avenue if we don't that ramp?
Well, we'll get to our pursuit rate versus the rest of Dane County, and possibly we might have the highest pursuit rate per capita in Wisconsin. We might have the highest pursuit rate in the country. When we talk about some of the state, I would ask where does our pursuit rate align? Where's it fall within Wisconsin?
That's not my question. Is your problem then is with the pursuit rate?
So over policing Sherman is resulting and combined with a policy that literally allows us to pursue anyone. And I'm gonna ask questions to learn more, like how many disciplinary actions have we had in those 187 pursuits? That I can talk about the Brandon Dolly pursuit. So I can,
Why don't we finish this up and then we'll move to that?
Okay.
So any more discussion just generally on police policy, and I don't see any questions online. Looking for their hand or wanting to comment that way. So then why don't we transition to item number 6 on the agenda on discussing able pursuits, and Gary, you can see specifically about that policy, and you can then get to your questions on the.
Sure. As the members of the board, I previously sent out an email, after the Capital Times article had been raised. and wanted to make sure that we brought this forward. There was also an email that was circulated among residents that Ryan had sent out. And I wanted to have an opportunity in a public forum to have the discussion. In your document, there's just, in your packet, there's a orienting document. It's basically a summary of our vehicle pursuits overview report, which is available online publicly. It is approximately, I think it's between about 25 pages, I believe. So I wanted to provide you with something that's a little bit more easy to digest and provide some explanation on why we approach vehicle pursuits the way that we do. And we aren't the only ones who utilize the same framework. Most notably, we use Lexipol as our policy framework. And as does a number of other agencies, I don't know all of them locally who do, but I do know the city of Monona, for example, also uses Lexipol as their policy structure. The reason we used we went to Lexipol in 2021. We at that point, all of our police policies were between 7 and 10 years outdated, and we needed to be updated. Lexipol pulls from best practices, legal review, and general guidance. They do their software-based access to policies that are regularly updated based upon review of state statutes, best practices, and recommended guidelines. It makes it a lot easier not only for us to make sure we're keeping our policies up to date, but with changes that might occur within legislature or state statute, but also ensuring that our officers have access to them. We can track the fact that they've signed off on them. And they also come with what are called daily training bulletins, where we issue out basically anecdotal snippets about a scenario, and the officer reads it and then answers the question. So it embeds training and policy familiarization into the daily practices, so our officers can be familiar with policy. Our policy manual is over 400 pages long. It's more information than anybody can truly digest. And we haven't even adopted all of the policies that are recommended for complete adoption of the policy manual. We have adopted all the ones that are required and necessary, and then the ones that are also operationally beneficial for us. That said, that's why the daily training bulletins, I think, is so important. It's living, breathing, constantly interacting. Our officers are constantly interacting with the policy so that they're familiar with it and they can use it to make the best decisions they possibly can on in a very complicated and complex job. As far as our vehicle pursuits are concerned, the policy that Lexipol provides and that we have adopted has an intention of balancing a very complicated and challenging issue, which is the dangers associated with driving in general and vehicle pursuits. One of the most dangerous things that police or anyone does on a daily basis is drive a vehicle. And now you're talking about doing it under elevated speed conditions and in very difficult, challenging decision-making situations. Balancing that with the obligation that police officers have to enforce the laws and hold offenders accountable such that they don't continue to create more victims and present a protracted danger to the public in general. I hope you had a chance to kind of look through the handout, which kind of goes through some of the trends. This goes through some of the trends that we've seen over the past 5 years, some of the impacts that we've achieved through that process, as well as what we've done to improve our training, equipment, and mitigating risk along the way. I would say that on page 2, the section that says current challenges and strategic outlook, we have, I think if you look at our statistics, you'll be able to recognize that we've seen a trend in suspects fleeing from our offices, where back in 2018 or 2019, I think it was 1.7, I don't remember the statistics offhand. in, 2019, we had 18 individuals leave from our officers. Fast forward to we came to a steadily increased in 2023, we had 44. Right? So from 2019, we had 18 individuals who fled from our officers over the year. 2020, that rose to 23, 2021, 40, 2022, it stayed at 40, 2023, 44, and then in 2024, we saw a slight drop down to 35 individuals fleeing from our officers. We've noticed regionally at the same time, not just people fleeing from officers on traffic stops, but some concerning trends in the Madison area from a crime perspective and violent crime perspective specifically. And so I would just say that what's categorized as rising kind of boldness from a criminal mindset standpoint puts more people at risk. Their willingness to flee, resist officers, fight back, and defy officers' lawful authority to hold them accountable for committing crime, creates more and more risk for the general public. And so, that said, I do believe that our vehicle pursuit policy gives our officers the discretion necessary in order to make difficult decisions with the proper guidance and guidelines to make a determination to achieve the best outcome. I think that other municipalities who've chosen to go to restrictions that would say that you can only pursue individuals who have committed and will continue to commit violent felonies, leaves individuals who are the most dangerous in society active and continue to commit crime and make more people victims. And I think that creates a protracted safety issue that we don't, that this community would not want to live on. That I would not want for my family to live in a community where that was allowed.
Any number of questions, comments, or Tim?
Can you describe in general terms, as you understand, what the city of Madison's pursuit policy is relative to what?
By using a low resolution answer, I'm sure we could get something incorrect.
Okay.
But generally speaking, my understanding is Madison Police Department's policy is tailored and crafted by the Madison Police Department. They don't use a policy, they don't use Lexipol. They have their own policy that they go through and utilize their own process. And they found that works for them. And they went to, it's my understanding that they went to a violent felony only style policy back when Chief Mark Cobalt was in office decades ago. And this was following the city of Milwaukee going to a similar pursuit policy after there were some notable incidents that occurred in that state. At that same time, I believe the city of Middleton and other surrounding municipalities in Dane County went to what's understood as a more restrictive set of vehicle pursuit policies. Notably, when I started working for the Village of Maple Bluff back in 2012, it wasn't this policy, but we did not have a restrictive pursuit policy. When we changed our policy in 2021, it didn't become less restrictive. Is what I'm saying. It actually became providing more guidance and more direction. Madison, to this day, their policy, I believe, discourages participation in pursuits by their officers, which is one of the reasons why you see Madison does not engage in vehicle pursuit.
No, I actually personally witnessed them coming out of.
As much, sorry, they do engage in vehicle pursuit.
Right, but I was coming out of the fitness center in college, country club, and watched the pursuit and Brendan going, coming up the wrong way, down toward the beach, and so forth. And I have to say there was probably half a dozen police cars that were police officers that were part of the chase. Is that consistent with your recollection?
Yes,
And that's a function of mutual aid. How did that come together with all those movements and police cars?
Yeah, so when an incident starts to unfold, regardless, you're talking about Maple Bluff or multi-jurisdictional incident, dispatch is gonna notify all the officers in the general area. And so if there's an incident, and let's say a vehicle pursuit, officers who are in the general area are gonna position themselves and start moving into position to support that other officer. We're very fortunate to be surrounded by the city of Matthew because they have a lot of resources that benefit us in that way. And so where officers may be coming to an incident location, with lights and sirens, speeding, which may be the same type of activity as the officer is actually in the pursuit itself, they may not technically be part of that pursuit. So I don't know from, in that scenario specifically, that the officers were in the pursuit. They may have been trying to get into the pursuit, they may have been trying to position in other locations to put down spike strips or other things of that nature to try to bring the pursuit to a safe end.
I don't know that I heard the answer.
I'm sorry.
What's Madison's policy? It's only to pursue if there's violent felonies.
So, yeah, I would have to, well, I would have to look at their policy because I wouldn't want to misspeak to this committee about what the details are of it.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that what it is?
yes, it's much more restrictive to the point where there's very specific circumstances under which those officers will.
Right. Okay, and then what's our policy?
Our policy is also very specific, but it allows officers more discretion. So it's not restrictive. It doesn't say you will not pursue unless there's a violent felony. You will not pursue unless, our officers can initiate a pursuit based upon someone fleeing from them. Now they have to make a determination on what's determined as the balancing test. And the balancing test is based upon that officer's assessment of public safety effectiveness. And
So they get stopped because they don't have their ticket. And they drive off.
oftentimes what will happen in a circumstance like that, our officer will initiate a pursuit, which is they flip on their lights and sirens. They notify dispatch that the vehicle is taking off on them. And then, and as they do that, they make an assessment from that point. They go, oh, are there pedestrians out? What is how many, is the traffic heavy, light, or medium? What are the weather conditions? Is it raining? Is it icy? Do I already know who this individual is? Did I see the driver? Do I have other investigative tools that can facilitate identification of the individual so that I don't have to pursue it? And there's, within our policy, there's a number of different variables that it lists out that our officers consider in making that determination.
And where's
It's on our webpage. It's on the police department page. Did you get my email?
I did,
Okay,
I did.
it's on our website.
I guess I got lost in all
I'm sorry.
I was looking for something that says this is our policy and there's nothing like that.
Yeah, so with, I don't disagree. Police policy tends to be very thick, and very deep, and, it's not like policy that you see in other industries where it's a policy statement and then the rest are guidelines and operational mandates. There's probably other individuals in this room who could speak to the history of that better than I could.
Okay. Yes, because I was looking at the summary, which is 2 pages, and I still couldn't find this policy, but that's because what you're saying is the policy is 10 pages long.
And more probably.
One page,
Yeah.
whatever.
So Jan, I've asked you this before, but just want to make sure nothing has changed. Fully supportive of everything with the pursuit policy and everything you're doing. One thing that I just always remain concerned about is everything that increases the village exposure to liability. And I've asked you before, but I just want to confirm that if our policy doesn't do anything to increase or change our insurance coverage or anything else that we have as a village.
And we actually have a representative here from our.
Perfect.
Because that was one of the topics that was raised. That was one of the topics that was raised in Ryan's email. And so I wanted to make sure we had someone here who could speak to it other than you are listening to me talk about it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan, I'm your agent with, League Mutual Insurance, and this is my colleague Craig Sherman. He's our public safety specialist and, former police chief, so, but to answer your question, no, this is not something that we micromanage from an underwriting perspective. I am not an underwriter, but this is not something that would impact, our ability to provide coverage for liability.
We're not paying a higher rate because of this policy versus if we adopted a different policy, we get a credit or something.
No. No, we actually rate, so the police professional, which is a professional liability policy, is rated on a number of officers, full-time, part-time. And, you know, we have 550 municipalities in the state, so a very strong program. But, as I said before, there's no way we could take a look and underwrite on that metric, which is all those different policies with all the different communities. Mhm.
What kind of?
Yeah, so, I did bring a handout that I think will maybe just be helpful, just a one page. Take a look at this. You're welcome. And you are familiar with the League of Wisconsin? Sure. Thank you. So yeah, this is your second year with the program. And I was very pleased to see you make the move. As I mentioned before, this program is the #1 insurer, for a reason. It's actually connected to the association. So you're an associate member who lobbies for public entity, and then the mutual insurance program has been around a very long time. And this program was built, specifically for Wisconsin public entities. So our board is actually made up of administrators, mayors, you know, people that really understand what the needs are. And so what's important to look at, relating to this topic today is the police professional liability limit. And you'll see that there is a $5 million limit all the way down. And the prior company we were with actually had an aggregate. And we have a per occurrence limit of $5 million with no aggregate. You can have as many $5 million losses as you would like, very unlikely. But that's a much broader liability program to have.
Is that per incident or person? So if there are 2 passengers in the car, could each sue for 5 million or could each 2.5 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they could. Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, yes.
Per incident or per person?
So, yes, if we had 2 individuals and it was related to that one incident, there would be 5 million available, however that was allocated. And so when I kind of got looped into this, I thought something that would be important to share, because we insured so many public entities for a very long time, is our largest law enforcement loss that we have is $2.5 million. And that was a use of force claim. Our largest claim overall, out of all these large cities that you can think of, is 4.7 million. Land use claim. Yeah, yep. So 550 public entities throughout the state.
You writing down?
We do not, this is the League of Wisconsin Mutual Insurance Company.
I just asked because the Golden one we talked about, they lost 33.5.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did speak, you know, with our CEO, he was out of town, and several of our attorneys, is Wisconsin, we just don't see those nuclear verdicts. Like Cook County, California, New York. We're fortunate, and if you were to see the premiums compared to other states for public entities, very low here. Because we just don't see those types of verdicts.
If you cover, like, city in Milwaukee, you know, big municipalities at home.
We do, yeah, and that particular Milwaukee, I think is maybe a self-insured program. Madison is one of 2 cities that are with a competitor called Limit. Lacrosse and Madison, and historically was established for a very long time. It's more of a county program. But yes, larger cities all the way down to the smaller villages, that you can probably take them.
Can you talk a little bit about the chief tax expenses for municipalities and office?
Yeah, so there are tort caps, related to property damage and bodily injury to a third party, which are capped at 50,000, auto liability at 250,000. I think, that could be 350. So those do exist, but the one thing to keep in mind is, when there's an allegation of constitutional rights having been violated, they work their way to federal court. And that's where we see the tort caps no longer apply. But as I said before, you do see that, but you know, a $2.5 million loss out of all of the claims that we've had related to law enforcement is something to pay attention to and potentially to address. But I mean, you'll never be able to eliminate the risk. But you guys are at a very healthy limit. If you were at 3 million, I probably would have said when I started working with you, 5, 6 makes more sense. Our lead attorney worked for Dane County for 15 years. Dane County, I think, carries a 10. We think about the exposure and amount of activity in terms of what we're talking about here today.
Can you explain that? Because it's per incident, so why would their one incident reach 10 and our one is 5? Why, you somehow said they should have 10, we should have 5. Can you explain that?
I just think based on the size of this community and the amount of activity that's going on here, a 5 is what I would suggest, 5 or 6. But
We have more pursuits than that. Our 1,300 people has more pursuits than we have. So you would think it that way, our police liability is inadequate compared to what Dane County has, of course.
And the only thing that you don't be reading back it up because I think the data is lacking, and don't think all the police departments record the pursuits in the same manner we are. And I agree with you, proportionally, we probably are off, but I think we have gone through an exercise of keeping probably better police safety than anyone else's. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that. But it's just based on village resident need, and attention to detail. I think we're tracking these things. We're flattered,
Like, what makes you say that Madison under tracking pursuits, Monora's under tracking pursuits, but the police under tracking pursuits, but we're tracking them correctly?
Because I think if you have a policy that says that you aren't supposed to necessarily engage in a high-speed pursuit, it becomes eluding and you check the box as to what is high-speed pursuit.
So it's your opinion, you don't have any.
Correct, I said, I don't have any data on it, but based on conversations I've had with people with those police departments, rank and file officers that are supportive of a policy like the one that we have here in the village. I get the sense.
That makes sense.
Can you explain something? I'm sorry,
Just the fact that
they'll
So the way that the-
record it as something other than.
the way that an officer explained it to me is that in the city of Madison, you have to go check in with someone higher up, right? There's something like if it becomes a high-speed pursuit, you're supposed to then go into whoever the officer is on duty, check in with them, get permission to keep going, versus if it's just a
Following
pursuit.
your car if you're driving.
Correct. Yeah, and if it's just a pursuit, you don't have to. And I have a question of, well, how do you figure out what's the high-speed pursuit? It's something based on where you are and how far over the speed limit it is. So if you're chasing someone on the belt line, you can be driving faster than if they were on Federal Highway because it has a higher speed limit.
Right.
They don't necessarily have to check it. So there still is some officer discretion there that I think probably leads to the
And
number.
then they could call it eluding.
That's my understanding is that something not noted as a high-speed pursuit. So, and we don't, have the benefit of being able to bring Madison officers in and ask them about it. But it's just, it's I do think we do an excellent job on data gathering compared to other departments. And, so we're gonna have a higher number. Questions, comments among committee members before we open it up to the public?
Brian, I'll go last. So I've got like, I'm just gonna kind of read off, some context and I'll have some questions in there. And then you guys can speak to those afterwards, maybe that'll work. So the pack and taking is that I feel we're opening ourselves to, constitutional rights violations. So the Monell Doctrine allows citizens to sue government for constitutional rights violations because of violations caused by policy and customs. But I think our policy is intentionally written so we won't ever violate. It'll be hard to say we violated it. Where Madison's is intentionally written specifically so you can quantify when it's violated. It has specifics in it. So we have 500 times the pursuit rate of Madison per capita. And this data is off of a recent Cap Times article, which does not at all align with the data Canada gave. So it had 187 pursuits. I think that was over a 2-year period. I think the highest number, the 187 was over 40. Okay, a minute those. Was it 2 years or 4 years? 4 years. Oh, then my numbers are twice that. So we would have 250 times the pursuit rate of Madison per capita. We would be 70 times the pursuit rate of Illinois. My question to answer is this the highest in the state? Is it the highest in the country? I copied Tanner and Mike on November 30th of 23, after I had done requested data on our pursuits. And that time we were actually 459 times because Madison was like 20 pursuits or something like that. One of the questions I had in that of you both was where's our review process? Because Madison, I believe, every pursuit is reviewed like outside of the police department. I mean, the person who runs the police department and hires the police officer doesn't make the decision if there were any violations of the policy. It's more independent review board. So Dalton, Illinois, for those of you who hasn't gotten to it, they lost a $33.5 million case for pursuit, and the victims were in the backseat of the car. They weren't innocent bystanders that were walking down the street that got run over. They were in the back of the car. In the claim that was filed, and they lost their appeal and they have to pay them. In the claim that was filed, Dalton has fully failed to supervise police chases in the years prior to the instant chase. As a result, Dalton has one of the highest, if not the highest rate of police chases in Illinois. In the 5 years prior to the instant police chase, Dalton has been involved in approximately 50 police chases, which approximately half resulted in crashes, personal injury, or death, or property damage. So that kind of year was from a city of 20,000, where I guess we were 40 some in 1 year. Yeah, so we're 4 times and we're 1/8 of their size. Yeah, so that was 70 times per capita. And then the next point in that claim was such a high rate of crashes and high rate of injury or property damage put Dalton on notice that his officers were engaged in unsafe chases, but negligently and recklessly failed to supervise its police officers and insisted that they follow the standard of care as police officers, thereby giving defendants Lacey and Perez the green light to engage in illegal chase because they knew that no matter how reckless their conduct was, that they would not be disciplined. And then the next quote I have, so I'm kind of like, what are the elements of a Monroe doctrine? It's custom, it's culture. The next I have is the quote from John Gross, clinical associate professor of law at the University of Wisconsin. And this is out of the article. You can't possibly be justified in chasing that many people in high-speed pursuit. It's such an aberration based on how small those departments are, he said. Well, it's clearly a result of policy and culture that is driving this behavior. So the committee, it's your culture, and Tanner, it's your culture at driving this behavior. Getting back to the Monroe Doctrine of policy and custom. So it's not just the policy, but it's custom. So that article had us having 187 pursuits, 37 crashes.
So I think this is an important question. How many resulted in disciplinary actions against the officer? So does our policy have any teeth in that we have disciplined police officers in pursuit, or is it zero? So you can answer really quick. If it's not zero, I'd like to know, or is it zero?
The disciplining them for what?
Violating the policy
So whatever you're gonna pursue that's not allowed.
that violated the policy in some way. Have, on those 187 has it ever violated the policy? And if that's a zero, I think that is gonna speak to culture of our police officers know that they can do anything they want in a pursuit. So
Or is that also a result of the police officers following the policy?
very well, right? Like if you are in the stand looking at the jury and there's a family who lost their loved one, that's what you can say to them. But I would be the lawyer, it would probably become the other story. Right, and then of these pursuits, you guys review it? You review everyone? You review zero? What is your oversight? Or is it just the hiring, firing police chief who reviews them, where Madison has an independent review process for their pursuits? So it's less bias, right? I mean, every human's got bias. You know these officers, you have bias. And then how many times were the passengers in the car? Because that increases our liability, because they're the ones who they don't have any choice in this matter. You know, they're along for the ride. And how many times were bystanders injured? We know the answer to this, because I know Ruth Connick wrote an article about Maple Pursuit on the belt line, where a bystander was hit by the car being chased, the car was totaled and they had injuries. We know this, you know this as our leaders. And then the final is Brandon Gully, correct me and please collaborate, right? So that was a 9 a.m. on a Sunday. That pursuit was initiated because he made an erratic move, right? So it wasn't that he was speeding, it wasn't that our police officer noted a traffic violation, it was an erratic move. The police officer chased him through our village streets at 9 a.m. on a Sunday at a high speed. The day before that, Saturday at 9 a.m., my wife and I have been highly involved with the Boy Scout wreath sales. Every Boy Scout in New Block was out on our surface streets delivering wreaths. First of all, if we're pursuing them, they're continually going. So Brandon Gully obviously had control because he died, but a police officer could have easily hit one of those Boy Scouts. I gotta ask you, is the life of a Maple Bluff child worth catching someone in that moment for an erratic move? And then I would ask, did that police officer violate our policy anyway? Was that police officer disciplined? So those are my comments. It's really around our customs, our culture. What would a jury think? Not like what do you guys think? How easy would it be for an attorney to talk about the municipality with the third highest property values in Wisconsin? That's 91% white, less than 1% black, that won't keep racial data on who they're chasing, and that has 250 times surrounding neighbors' pursuit policy. We aren't going to be the good guys in that courtroom, you know. So that's my concern, that we're setting ourselves up for a Monell Doctrine case for a civil rights violation, where I didn't know it, but all those caps go by them. So what I'm really interested in is have any of those resulted in a violation, or do we have a culture where you're never going to be disciplined as a police officer for a pursuit? And then what does my board know? Like, how involved and what do you know, our committee, what do you know about these pursuits, other than there wasn't a violation from the police chief, if that's how it is? Thank you.
Who wants to go first, right? So first off, we do get updates from Tanner. We all get notable calls. We do the public documents as well, so he does make all of us aware of when they happen. I laughed that the moped chase did not result in a high-speed chase. That would have liked to see the person try to go fast on it. My understanding is we haven't had any instances, and then you can correct me, where we have had officers violate the policy, or that it's resulted in anything that we need to have a review by the village board, by this committee. And we've been fortunate that our officers have conducted these pursuits in a correct manner. And,
Respond.
okay,
Do you think a defense lawyer would state that our policy is so vague that it's not, it's kind of way we did, violate it? I mean, are there any specifics in there?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to step in. During my tenure here, we have had one instance where we had an officer who needed to be disciplined because of their actions during a vehicle pursuit, and that officer no longer works with our agency. We have had other occasions whereby, policy had not been followed, it had been violated, and we took either, educational, training, or other measures to correct the deficiency and address those deficiencies so that we can learn and make sure that those mistakes don't happen again. No, so last year, there were 2 instances where, we noted that the policy, so we conduct a review, so when our officers get into a pursuit, our operations sergeant then reviews that pursuit. They watch the video, they read the reports, they look at all the information associated with that event. He then drafts a interdepartment memo that I receive to orient me to the pursuit itself, and I review that. As part of that interdepartment memo, he makes an assessment on whether or not he believes department policy has been violated and the corrective actions that he recommends we take if it had been violated. Oftentimes, so there were 2 instances last year where the policy had been violated. One of them was, it was the detective sergeant's opinion that the policy was violated because the speed of the pursuit was so high. And there was another instance where there were enough other, it was an assist other agency vehicle pursuit, I believe the city of Madison, but there were enough other cars involved in the pursuit that our officer reasonably didn't need to be involved with it. In both of those cases last year, those officers were spoken with and understood the implications and the course correction that they were given. So disciplinary action was not taken or taken.
You spoke the speed, does our policy mention a certain speed?
No, it doesn't have a specific speed, but when you, that's why this situation is very dynamic and there's a lot of variables to assess, not only from a decision-making standpoint of the officer who's engaged in the pursuit, but also from a review standpoint. And so there isn't a hard fast, you can only go 120 miles an hour, specific number, no, there's no.
So 9 AM on Sunday, 60 miles an hour, is that too fast to make a bluff?
I don't think that that's enough information to say yes or no to your question. 9 AM on a Sunday at 60 miles an hour. Because the safety question, it's a safety question.
Right down Lakewood for an erratic movement, is that safe?
Again, this is a safety question, not, you're
still
speaking to.
though, right?
Okay.
but I think one of the things, Ryan, and I think it's just a fundamental disagreement on this.
Mhm.
There is a growing culture of people who do not believe in the rule of law. Who do not believe in a society that laws are the way we're gonna operate. They're either with disrespect laws, they don't necessarily need to follow the rules. And you're absolutely right that Anna has taken this department and with the support of this committee of being, we want to enforce the rules that we have in place. When an individual decides to flee a police officer after a erratic move, we don't know necessarily why, right? We don't know if it's because they have a warrant outstanding for their arrest, if they have a person in the car with a knife in their neck, whatever it may be. But they have decided to make a choice to flee from the police. And our rules are saying they have made this the choice, they believe that it was a smart decision to drive away. And we're gonna then pursue that.
Speak to the balance.
The balance, but we don't know the balance at the time, right?
Race
We know,
versus an erratic move, and the danger that erratic move proposed to all of us.
Society.
Well, that's a separate question, whether or not you initiated a pursuit in the first place, or seek to pull somebody over in the first place. The driver who engaged in the erratic move could have simply pulled over because there was nothing problematic about his conduct. He might have gotten a citation, or he might have gotten a warning. The incident occurred when he failed to stop, not, if you look at you look at the issue of the erratic move that's somehow part of the balancing, I think that's not part of the analysis.
And to be fair about the instance that's being talked about, I think it's only fair to actually be honest about the incident that we talked about. The thing that got the officer's attention was the individual turning in onto Lakewood Boulevard, which seemed erratic and suspicious. When that officer then turned, he didn't immediately turn on his lights because he was trying to do was catch up to that vehicle and get a license plate. He was initiating an investigation based upon an observation of suspicious activity. At that point, that vehicle started speeding down a 25-mile-an-hour road at high rates of speed, creating a danger to the public. Now, a police vehicle is outfitted with lights, really loud sirens, in order to try to prevent people from getting hurt in circumstances where someone's driving erratic. So this individual was already driving at a high rate of speed away. So I'd rather be honest about what that officer saw in their decision and make them to pursue. If you have somebody who's driving at a high rate of speed, creating safety.
With a 5-year-old on a bike, should have got out of the way because the sirens were on. You know, I did driving fast through Maple Bluff. I mean, your argument was you had lights. You know, so the point is like, where's the balance? What I heard was once they go, it doesn't matter if it's erratic move or a felony, they went and we're chasing them. And
Right.
they got it. So then there is
a decision.
So then there is no balance of risk of
Sure.
the chase.
I think Tanner described whether there are pedestrians in the area, so.
So 9 AM, there's pedestrians in the
Were
area.
there pedestrians in the area,
It's-
in this space? Are
So
you
I guess-
aware of it? I mean, I guess what you're offering a whole different
The
hypothetical.
police
And then
officer
suggest-
doesn't
can I
know
finish my
there is
point?
not.
Can I finish my, he doesn't know there's not? He's
Correct.
Looking around in the area. He can
Correct.
see it.
Like
And if
if
he
you go in
sees
60,
pedestrians, he can pull off. But what I think you're doing, Ryan, is you're setting up all sorts of hypotheticals and saying, if this hypothetical that didn't exist had existed, wouldn't that be part of the analysis? Sure, if it were, but it's not. And so you cite the data, or rather you cite the facts from Dalton and Marshall. Have you done an analysis of the policies in Dalton and the actual facts that led to that lawsuit and that judgment? And how that compares to the policy in the village of Maple Bluff and incidents that we've dealt with? I mean, you throw all of these facts. Okay, can you
So
provide it in
the-
writing so we can evaluate it? Because you're throwing around a
So
lot
the-
of facts that have no content.
So the biggest fact that I have contact is the article by the law from that one stated they discovered a disproportionate pursuit rate. And that's what allowed them to win this case. And then when I went and found the actual complaint, it speaks to that disproportionate pursuit rate.
Mhm.
And then I give you the facts that we have this tremendous disproportionate pursuit rate. And it's quite possibly the highest in the state we were 6 times that of Monona, right? So Monona's high, we're 6 times that. We're quite possibly the highest in the state. We're quite possibly the highest in the country.
You say we have 6 times more pursuits than the city of Monroe?
Per capita. So we're a tiny little village. The quote from the law professor who specializes in this said, for their size, it's an aberration.
You know, and personally, I think that's something that we should be proud of. I think the real question for the bill report,
These, like, when, is it, if we did get a lawsuit and
what I'm
the
saying
police
is our
committee,
office, yes, because of the fact that what our police department does is look at these activities to make sure that they're in line with our policies. That Dalton maybe wasn't necessarily do it. We're taking steps, to make sure officers are educated and stopping pursuits when they need to. But I think the broader point that you're missing, and it is one that I question, is whether or not we're subsidizing the city of Madison and the surrounding communities' policing efforts because we're doing work that they are not. That is a greater question for the village of how much of our police resources are being spent taking care of other problems that we have in our community. And if that's a question of a line of discussion that you want to go at, that's a whole nother thing for the village to think about and decide whether or not, if, you know, we should be pursuing people because the city of Madison or the county of Dade or whatever communities are not doing adequate policing work.
For the CAP's time writer that is here, I just wanted to make sure I didn't misquote you. That as the leader of the police committee, you are proud that we have such a disproportionate pursuit rate and that two hundred
Not
fifty
a
times.
disproportion. The fact that we're engaged in the policy. That is what I'm saying. Not
Then
the
shock me.
disproportion.
I think it's a problem.
But I've said it to you before. You and I have had these conversations before. We had these a couple of years ago. And I agree with you. The disproportionate aspect of it, nobody likes to be disproportionate, but I'm saying questioning the policy itself is what I don't have an issue with.
We have had no conversations on pursuits. I asked you in the email and you have not replied.
No, we did, didn't we have a conversation a couple of years ago when this first came up? Okay, so it must have been with another village one. Sorry, I thought it was you. It was 2 years ago, whenever this issue came up. And we talked about this at different police committee meetings. I stated a consistent position at that one.
Can I ask a question? I wasn't gonna bring this up because I'm so new, but, one of my reactions to all of this is, are we single-handedly trying to solve a much bigger problem with our little 1,400?
But to me, that's our question, that we have to face as a village.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure this community is as safe as it can possibly be. And that includes visitors, that includes people who pass through, and it definitely, that involves our residents. The biggest concerns that I have for public safety in our community, the number one is reckless driving, is driving behavior. The most dangerous thing that most people do on any given day is get into their vehicles and be driven. A lot of people die on the roadways, and reckless driving and driving behaviors, we've seen an increase in recklessness over the past several years, so it has become an increasing channel.
And is that in the village or is that only on?
Well,
Where's your focus?
No, I hear it. Well, so I believe that we are for the amount of traffic that we have in the different areas of the community. I think that we proportionately allocate resources. So if 80% of the traffic comes through the village on North Sherman, I would be fine with 80% of our traffic enforcement focus being on North Sherman. I think that that's proportionate and reasonable. That said, I also think it's important that we do a lot of work inside the village, which is why we focus on the vacation checks, why we focus on the parking, why we're at community events. Well, because traffic enforcement is important, because so again, we had 112 arrests last year. 9 out of 10 of those individuals that we arrested were either had a walk, were either repeat offenders or violent offenders. But the individuals who are fleeing from us, I'm sorry, out of all the pursuits that we have, I don't want to get the statistics wrong. What is pursuit? Sorry, I don't mean to belabor my point here. Our focus is on violent offenders, repeat offenders, and reckless drivers. That's our focus on. And proportionately, we focus on traffic enforcement on North Sherman as a byproduct. And that is where a lot of our incidents engage in. But if those individuals are coming to our community, the priority is to deter people from behaving recklessly within our community. Because when we do have people on bikes and kids walking around in the streets, especially streets that don't have sidewalks, that people don't come into Maple Bluff and behave in that way that puts people at risk in jeopardy. And the way that our officers are enforcing the strategy that we pursue and the tactics that they engage in deter people from coming into our community, and it prevents people from getting hurt.
You just hit on the topic I wanted to talk about is pedestrian safety, bicycle safety. I would say 90% of the pedestrian and bicycle traffic is not on Sherman. It's in Maple Bluff. How does,
Well, I don't know if 90%, I'd say there's probably a lot more at least bicycle traffic on North Sherman because it's a twiddle and there's bikes going in on each side, but yeah, we have a lot of bicycle traffic in the corridor.
I would say the 90% of village resident pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic are within the village. And I would say that policing the traffic on Sherman is not helping. If there's a risk to the pedestrian and bicycle traffic from reckless driving in the village, I would say that's where our policing should be to help that, make that more safe, not on Sherman.
So the presence of police officers, and the visible presence of police officers tends to, on the average, bring people into alignment with the rules and regulations, right? Like, so you see a cop who's like pulled somebody over on the side of the road, guess what happens? People slow down, right? And so that activity, before people have a chance to turn into our community, if the officers are active on North Sherman, people turning into our community aren't going to be acting in such a reckless way. It's a finding effect. Same thing as our speed board that we have. That it's to let people, one, educate, let people know, oh, how fast they're going, but it's a visual signal to let them know and give them an opportunity to self-correct.
We have other questions, comments, I think you want to discuss. Anybody online?
Maybe you can talk a little bit about, and I remember this, you said in that half of the high-speed pursuits were terminated because there were risks that your officers decided were too great. Maybe you can talk about that. Because I think part of the concern is that the pursuit itself is increasing danger and risk.
Yeah, so we've, our officers do terminate on average about half of their pursuits. They did last year, they did the year before. I haven't looked at the data for this year, where we're at right now as far as the year is concerned. But consistently, our officers are making those decisions. I would say that the percentage of pursuits that our officers have terminated have decreased since 2019. I do attribute that to our focus on training, our focus on ensuring that the policy and guidelines are clear, and providing them with the support and confidence to make good decisions along the way. We train, so the state standard is that you train in vehicle pursuits or emergency vehicle operation once every 2 years. Our department hosts an in-service for vehicle pursuit or EVOC training twice a year. So the most dangerous thing that my officers do every single day is get into a car, right? So I want them to be really, really good at driving a vehicle. I want them to be subject matter experts. I want to put them into the best equipment that they possibly can and give them the best training they possibly can to set them up for success. They have very difficult jobs, and this is something that's dangerous. They need to go home to their families at home. But their job is to keep your family safe too. And that means that they have to intersect with very dangerous people too. And in order to do that, they have to be well supported. If they're not well supported, then they can't do that job effectively. And what happens is you have escalating criminal behavior and boldness, which is what we really a trend of.
Just give us some examples of the termination. Why is it terminated? Why isn't it?
So for example, last year, 32% of the pursuits that were terminated, 32% were from environmental or safety concerns. So officers seeing pedestrians on the roadway, there's icy roads, wet conditions, something along those lines. 56% were suspect location and distance. This person took off and the officer isn't even behind them. They're going so fast that our officers in high performance vehicles can't keep up because they have to drive safely. They have to drive with due regard. Due regard is a legal concept where officers have an obligation to drive despite going above the speed limit, despite all the numerous variables, they have to drive safe. And that's one of the key things we focus on in training. And 56% of the pursuits that they terminated last year were because of suspect distance. And 12% were because their squad was disabled. It's becoming a little bit more frequent that our officers, other agencies, in an attempt to support our officers in their vehicle pursuits, will put down spikes there. Sometimes we end up hitting spikes. And so our vehicle will become disabled and we can no longer use it.
You're with the estimate, I apologize if I didn't see that.
No, so this is
Yeah.
available online. It is our vehicle pursuits overview.
Yep.
On page 4, it has a longitudinal kind of outlay of our statistics and for the 6-year period.
Okay,
So,
so everybody can see that?
Yeah, it's online. It's on our police department website.
very helpful, thank you.
I have a comment, well, go ahead.
So Ryan, again, Scott Fire, my question to you is that, so your preferred policy would be no pursuits whatsoever?
I would like to align with Madison, so we don't, we don't become a target of lawsuit. So we're not so, disproportionate to our surroundings.
Your perfect policy would be do what Madison does. Is that an honest?
Actually, here's what I'd really like to do. I would like to adopt Madison's policy for 1 month. And I would like to flip our policing to 90% internal and 10% on Sherman. And that, cause I hear over and over, you're doing it for our safety. And I would like us to decide, how are we gonna measure our safety? And then see what the results are. And then be proven completely wrong or be proven completely right. Now I'd ask you, what is the risk of that? I would love to see us set a certain amount of time and say, we're gonna adopt Madison's policy for 1 month, 3 months. And instead of telling us how unsafe we are, we're gonna pick what a metric is for our safety, i.e. some sort of violent crime or, I don't know the lexicon, but some crime on Maple Bluff citizens and measure it and see what happens. Cause I don't buy that arrest of pulling over a lot of people on Sherman makes us safer. In fact, I think it makes us less safer than having the intersections people drive through are Kensington and Oxford, Kensington and Fisk Woodland Circle, Fisk and Lakewood as they're kind of commuting through type of things, like that's more risk, I think, than someone with an outstanding warrant or who knows what that we pull over and they take off on Sherman.
Your concern isn't necessarily a liability concern.
It is, that is a big concern, so. But it's more of a social question on, this tiny little rich town policing the greater Madison, for hyperbole, I'll call it the interstate, because it kind of makes the point, it's just not our business.
So officers aren't policing Madison, I just want to be clear. That's been a narrative that's been pushed out before. All of our,
Madison citizens,
with the exception of, instances where we mutual aid other communities, our officers focus on, and their observations are within the village of Maple Bluff. People who live on North Sherman are also residents of this community. And that's important to remember and to point out.
you said all of the arrests are Madison, not Maple Bluff citizens, I'll call them Madison citizens, but they could be Warwick or whatever. But we are, you guys would be mass question, you've got the sense that we are, whatever your concern, mine's social, yours could be fiscal, that we are paying to police the greater Madison citizens.
No, I think we're policing Sherman Avenue, which is part of the village. And it's important to have a significant police presence on Sherman Avenue because the police presence deters criminal activity to the general man. Now, I'm not an expert, I defer to Tanner, given his vast expertise on it. But I think the idea, and I, by the way, I've seen a much greater presence of Maple Bluff police within the village at the intersection of Kensington and Lincoln Boulevard, for example, down by the beach park. At various times I walk frequently, I'll see you out on the streets as well, and so you probably see those cars as well as I do. But I think the fact that we have a high police presence and enforce the law on North Sherman Avenue, makes this village safer. Just, now, I'm not an expert on it, but intuitively, and neither are you, I defer to Tanner based on his expertise. And it makes complete sense to me. So as it relates to whether this committee supports those policies, I do until I'm shown with some greater level of specificity that those policies don't work. And one of the things you said, Ryan, before, I said, do you think we need more policing within the village internally as opposed to on the edge on Sherman Avenue? You said, no, you feel told to stay. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what your concern is. You suggested that, no, we need more of a police presence within the interior. I see it, by the way, I see it every single day when I'm walking around the village. I see police cars monitoring different intersections. And I think they're doing a good job at that as well. But I think there's as Mike, I think, alluded to a little bit ago, it's a philosophy about how to, create a safe community, and a police presence creates a safe community. I believe that. I don't know if you disagree with that principle, but ultimately, I think the policies that have been implemented make sense to me. And if there's an analysis that you can do to show some, I was getting a little bit worked up about your recitation of a bunch of facts about some other communities I know nothing about, and circumstances that may bear no relationship with what we do here in the village of Maple Bluff, other than there's this sort of general risk of liability. And I don't practice in that area, but I think those kinds of concerns are usually overstated. I mean, if you can show, gee, we're violating our own policy on a regular basis, we're turning a blind eye to those violations, that's one thing. But if we've got a specific policy and it's being complied with on a consistent basis, then I'm very comfortable with it.
With the police chief, who I'm gonna give kudos to in the last 3 years, has his eye on the ball. And this is not a situation where you have a, administration that is not paying attention to what rank and file officers are doing. I mean, I have, based on the number of conversations with dinner is probably sick of that we have on this topic, you are fully engaged on it and fully talking with the officers that are out there doing this, that I can't imagine any of them want to get in trouble with him on this topic.
Yeah, so to your point, right, the disproportionate pursuit rate is the key point I've made with you several times. That's it. That's the only thing I have. The fact that, that's it, right? So nothing else. That's the common thread between Dolphin and us was there's probably a lot of reasons why they're a dumpster fire and, that was so high. But what Lachlan talked about was the disproportionate pursuit rate. That is what I'm trying to bring up, right? I don't want more policing in Maple Bluff. I don't feel unsafe at all. I just want less on Sherman, because it wasn't that long ago, Tanner was trying to get a referendum to add more police officers. Sometimes if you have a hammer, you go looking for nails to pound, right? So guess where those police officers are going to be? They're going to be pulling people over on Sherman Avenue. It's going to be listed as someone with a warrant. So it's going to be violent crime. The violent crime is going up in Maple Bluff, and we're not safe. So I just disagree with it. Makes it safer. I talked about one thing. Ray said, "What could we do?" I talked about one proposal is switch our policy and how we allocate our police for a set amount of time, and see what happens to our safety. Like, how would we measure safety? We'd have to talk about that, right? But we could actually do it. Another thing is Short Hills is very close. We're just like it's about the same size. They border University Avenue. Do they? I just know they didn't make your article. I don't know if you've got their pursuit volume and stuff like that at all. I don't know what it is. But it didn't pop, so I assume it's I don't know. I don't know what % of their policing is on University Avenue, but the idea that, that might, like, you guys as boards, do you ever collaborate with other boards to learn about things, to could make relationships with Shore Hills Police Committee to try to understand, you know, that sort of thing. I don't know, but there are things we could do to understand if it's making us safer or not safer, other than have Tanner continuously tell us how much safer we are because we're policing Sherman Avenue so much. I don't believe it. You do, I don't. And I actually proposed a way to understand it better. And I would ask, what would the risk to us be for that month or two, other than one of us is wrong? But I don't think our safety is gonna spike if we're.
I agree, and I don't think it'll happen for a month, it'll happen for 12, 18 months, 2 years. Well, thank you very much for your comments, and hopefully that you appreciate that you are being heard, and, you know, your messages to us are not being ignored, and I would be taking things into consideration.
Mike, what can I say? One,
Yes.
final thing, just for the board's edification, just so you all know my position on this, I do believe that you all are safer because of the hard work our officers did. I believe that action, that officers took and being proactive, the multiple different things from the traffic, vacation check, parking enforcement, public engagement, all of that work together and synergy with one another to keep the community safe. And I am still concerned about the growing population around the village. And I do believe that we should have 2 officers on duty at all times for an officer safety perspective and for the benefit of the community. Sherwood Hills does have more officers than we do. They choose to structure their department the way they choose to structure their department. And staff the way they choose to staff their department. I would like to see, for the benefit of my officers and for the safety of my officers, 2 officers on duty at any given time. I understand that the community opined on this and said that, you know, we didn't want to include that in our referendum last year, and I respect that. But as an advisor to the village board and to this committee, I feel it's my obligation to continue to let you know where I stand on the topic.
It was a good segue into item number 7 on the agenda, discuss closing the plan for future department and restructuring initiative. Yeah,
Yes. Good morning, I said. And I'll be brief. I'll try to. So as we look to the future, thank you. As we look to the future, not to be specific about any specific staff members, but we do have an individual who is looking at potentially retiring in the next year. Thank you. Appreciate that. But looking at retiring in the next year or so. As we look at that transition, I want to look at the structure of our organization and assess whether or not I would like to make a structural change to our department or organizational structure. As simple as this. I'd like to make one of our police sergeants a lieutenant during that transition. I think one of the key factors in this, there's a number of factors in it. One is that I have them listed here on this document for you, but one of the big factors in this is the WPPA, the police union. Right now, I'm the only individual in the police department who's not in the police union. For a number of different, whether it's human resources, disciplinary, just general overall ability to manage the department in a way that it doesn't inject unnecessary bias. I think that we should have somebody who is also not in the police union. Right now, it's written in the union contract that sergeants are part of the union. I also think that having a number 2 in command, given my dual role as administrator and chief of police, it makes logical sense to have somebody else in a position who could speak with a little bit more rank authority in my absence or for me when I need them to go to committee meetings, speak with this board, this committee, etc. I also would think it could infuse some career progression, some vertical career opportunity into our department, which, although historically our department has been able to retain officers over a long period of time, over the past several years, we've seen that the dynamic for recruitment and retention has changed within policing in general. We have a really strong team right now of really good individuals, and I'd like to have ways and mechanisms to try to keep them engaged and create vertical mobility. I think it's just one way we could move the needle on that as well. Yeah, so for all of that said, in your packet, I have a very rudimentary organizational chart on what the police department currently looks like. It's not, and it doesn't look too drastically different when we make the modification, it just gets a little bit more vertical. And I've also included the position descriptions on how we would delineate responsibilities and for those two, the creation of new positions. Right now, we have an administration sergeant and an operations sergeant. Essentially, what we're doing is making that administration sergeant and lieutenant position. And so I just wanted to bring this
I'm
to,
sorry, which one, again?
which
The administration. or-
the administration sergeant or lieutenant. I mean, there's roles and responsibilities that shift around and have been moved around, and I went through and created these two new position descriptions to kind of fit where I'd like to see the department going from a leadership perspective. And to be able to cover down on all of the different sets of responsibilities and duties that modern day policing requires. I wanted to bring this before this committee first, because the next step that I would bring it to would be the personnel committee to sensitize them to it, and I want to make sure that I give this committee an opportunity to provide any feedback, any general recommendations or consideration as we move forward.
What's the ballpark budgetary effect?
About $5,000, which I would utilize from our part-time officer budget.
So it's not an overall increase, it's just money.
It's shift money within the department.
And then what's the effect of taking one individual, make it non-unionized? Does it cost us more money then from a benefits perspective? Is neutral on that?
I don't think it costs us any more money.
It actually costs us more to have them.
In the union than out.
One of the things that I would also recommend with this is there would be union dues associated with that we would be paying, but I would like to offset that as a benefit for the lieutenant with like whether it's a fraternal order police or a WPPA coverage, so that they have liability coverage that we're paying for them as well.
I think this is a great idea, and I'd like to give my, positive, response to it.
Sherwood Hills operates under a similar model. They do have a chief and a lieutenant. And then a sergeant, and we also have a detective. They are more staff than we do. But we are a very patrol oriented department. And yes, we need investigative capacity. But I like to cover that with our patrol officers, making them experienced in investigations independently as well. That's one of the attractions to our department for officers is that they get to take it, in a larger department, you're kind of confined to how far you're gonna take a criminal investigation or a case. In our department, we want to encourage people to take it as far as they can and provide them with the support that they need to take it as far as they can. And I want to keep people for long periods of time. Don't want to see a whole lot of turnover if we can avoid it. And we've got a real, and I'll say this, we have a really strong team right now. The last two hires have been from the Beloit Police Department. One of those individuals was a detective, and both of those individuals were SWAT officers with the Beloit Police Department. This is a really nice change of pace for them. It's a really nice change of pace for them, where they can continue to do work that they find meaningful and keeping the community safe, but not being driven from very high stress call or very high call.
Well, the point you made early on, about having a formal second command dedicated to that position makes a lot of sense to me. If you're not available, I mean, to be clear. Alternative is be in charge of, it doesn't sound like a huge amount of money, but certainly nothing presented to invest on the local budget. If you need anything around, changing the structure as well. For that reason alone.
Is there anything that's lost administratively?
No, with the current staffing, that lieutenant's still gonna work patrol. When push comes, when I first started working here back in 2019 and into 2020, we had 2 less officers on the department. And if you recall, we had COVID, and then we had a lot of the unrest downtown. and which spilled over here to the village, which that's a protest at the governor's residence, at the executive residence. I put on the uniform and patrol as well, especially during those times. Fortunately, we are recommending that path and increase our staffing levels. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not gonna impact that. We try to utilize our part-time officer cadre as much as possible to ensure we have 2 officer coverage as much as we can. There's challenges with doing that. Part-time officers, have other lives. We can't direct them when to work. We open up opportunities for when they can work and they fill those. And so what we'll do is we'll work around the part-time officer schedules that we have and reposition or reschedule our full-time officers so that we can have 2 officer coverage at critical times as much as necessary. So we do a lot of finessing with schedule in general already. Takes a lot of care and time and attention, but it's worth it because what it means is that we have consistently the maximum staffing and of people who have a lot of experience with it.
So I think you said the next step is with the personnel committee that you're gonna bring this to them.
That's my general plan. I wanted to kind of float this by the police committee because I don't want to just start moving in the direction and not have potential support, especially at the board level, if we're gonna make it there. So ultimately, there isn't anything that needs to be approved, but again, I wanna be very transparent about how we're going about. I've spoken with the WPTA representative. She doesn't have any concerns with it. She thinks it's a good idea. She kind of told me I was wondering when you were gonna do that.
Good. Okay. Any other item? One thing Laura announced, if you may want to consider doing is a police ride along, we encourage everyone to do it. I hope you're an experience. I would if I know.
Well, I do see, I don't know if Officer Steck is still on the line right now. Officer Steck is our resident, ride-along, officer. He's one of our part-time officers. He's also an officer we got from Beloit. He actually was the line into the other officers at Beloit. But, yeah, he's a great person to take, residents on ride-alongs, very, very knowledgeable. You know, he has told me that no one has been willing to get out of the car yet. So, he will get you engaged with the activity on traffic stops and whatnot. So I strongly encourage anybody, if you want to know what it's kind of like, to do the work, to have a personal kind of testimony about the things we're talking about here. That's one way to get a really good benefit.
How do you do that?
Yeah, if he's on the call, all we gotta do is schedule a time and you can go on a ride along.
Send an email to Tanner.
Okay, great.
Did Brian ever do one?
No.
You did, just now? I thought I was suggested it to him a couple of years ago, but I will send him an email reminding him that I'd like him to. That makes me, I mean, the one takeaway that I'll tell you from the experience I had is just when you see an officer by themselves at night, late on Friday night, and you're sitting there and you're approaching a car with 4 to 5 people in it. I mean, it can be an unsettling experience, and so I understand why you would like to have 2 officers, just because we can, if they are the only officer and something bad does happen, they then have to wait for another department to come assist, because we only have 1 officer.
2 points on that. When I first became a police officer, my cousin came on a ride along with me with his department. It was a night shift. And about halfway through the ride along, he goes, "I don't know how you do this. I am a nervous wreck right now." It's a unique profession and it's really hard to get a taste for it unless you put yourself in the position. To that point, the second point I'd say is, for those of you who don't know, in the room we have our police chaplain, AJ Floyd. Chaplain Floyd goes on ride-alongs with our officers all the time. And I'm super appreciative of your service and your volunteer service. He's a great resource for our officers and for the department in general. He does this out of the kindness of his heart. He doesn't get compensated whatsoever. And I feel really privileged to have him as part of our team, and our officers feel privileged to have him part of our team. But he probably also has a number of testimonials that he could share from his experience on these ride-alongs with our office.
But if you do Friday night, I think the one night the board will start like 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. or something like that.
The streetlights come on.
Yeah.
That's when bad things happen.
That's simple. It's that simple.
My dad told me that, he was a deputy sheriff. In full transparency, I'm also, one of the two chaplains for Dane County Sheriff's Office. So, listening to everything that occurred today, I can provide, in my mind, retrospect with other departments. You have a great department. You have great people in the state. Dane County Sheriff's Office is a great department. And, you got a great leadership.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. We are adjourned.
Thank you all for your time, big anticipated 2-hour meeting, but.
Yeah, I will tell you, the meetings typically go about 30 minutes.
Sorry.
Oh,
I haven't had one for over a year.
So-
now you're not gonna- My hand is cramping. Eric, you keep your neighbor along.
I didn't realize you were in here until halfway through the meeting.
You said your neighbor's the door.
Oh.
Wow.
Let me just see, I'm gonna written on you, but I know I highlighted it. I can get you a non-highlighted version of the book.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, for sure, I can just print it off.
Okay.
You know what I would love to see, so I know that you have priorities in the board. One of our concerns is reckless driving and the impact of reckless driving, that don't take long to look through, and we've articles about people being injured and whatnot, and that in my mind is also intersects with this problem. I've seen it, it's a bunch of years, political officers, reckless driving, et cetera. And from our experience, the people who we end up taking into custody and arresting from these pursuits are people who are violent offenders, repeat offenders. The people who are committing crimes over and over and acting recklessly over and over. I'd love to see a fair overlay of, the impact of traffic accidents and the impact that has on really innocent people who live in our metropolitan area. Just, I understand that,
No, I'm not,
my opinion is the one that's shared by journalists, but.
Well, hey, if you're willing to do interviews with me, that does change the dynamic of the, I mean, it does allow for more context and nuance.
I know, I've been burned.
I understand
I've
now.
been burned, and I want to be very clear as much as I can, because something I say, maybe I didn't intend to say it that way, it's presented in a light. Yeah, that's fine. That's, I mean, that's,